Howdy, guys, gals, and non binary pals. This is the Tales from the Waystone Summer Reading Program.
We are your hosts, Will and Phoenix. Let's get into it.
Welcome to the first installment of our series on Becky Chambers' The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, Start of the Road. We're going to be reading pages 1 through 67 of the book.
At least the mass market paperback edition that is kind of black and bright green. And yeah, because A, there are a lot of different editions of this, and B, the chapters are long, but there are many vignettes within each chapter. So to divide this up evenly into 7 in our edition of the book was about 62 pages. And almost none of the chapter ends landed anywhere near that. So there will be times where we stop legit in the middle of a chapter or quote chapter. This time, however, we actually do get to the end of a chapter or a day or something.
So, anyway, this is going to be a lot of fun, and we hope you enjoy reading along with us.
Okie If you are new here, introduction to the pod. Each week we will be examining a section of The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet and figuring out what we can take from the text and apply to our real lives. We will also take some time to focus on a phronemos of the week, and then we will share a recommended thing of the week. Finally, we will wrap things up with 7 words from the book and 7 words from our own lives. Before we begin, let's get some disclaimers out of the way. First of all, we are in no way affiliated with Becky Chambers, that's not how you spell Chambers, or her publisher, Harper Voyager. Second of all, our discussion naturally assumes that you have read at least through the end of, I guess, the 6th chapter, around the 67-page mark of The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, because we are going to spoil it, though this one's going to be a little different. Anyway, a word to our community. Please be kind to yourselves and one another and the creators of the world that we love exploring. Speaking of it being a little bit different, this is a longer book than the last one, and I'm going to say that it's not as plot focused as it is character, theme, and idea focused.
Yeah, I mean, there's a central driving plot, but that's not really this is a story I think that's best described as being about the journey, not the destination.
It is a road trip.
Yeah. And it's also kind of cozy because the ship also happens to be everybody's home. So it is both a home and it's a vehicle. They're going all these different places, but they're never far from home, really.
And so instead of kind of plot by plot or blow by blow or really rehashing the story, our plan, now this is different, so it's hard for us to guarantee that we'll do it, is to focus on characters and themes more than plot.
All right. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and dive in. First chapter is not even really very significant. It just covers Rosemary's initial hyperspace journey to get to the Wayfarer, which is where the bulk of the action is going to be taking place.
I'd say it does a decent job of kind of bursting the bubble of an expectation of what sci-fi is. It comes up initially with the unpleasantries. This isn't a fun way to travel. This isn't like hyperspace or warp speed or any of that stuff. It's someone alone in a pod, drugged to ignore the entirety of the journey.
Yeah, she's traveling the lonely way. So, one of the things that it starts with, and this is kind of one of the themes that you'll find, is just a brief proverb from the Exodus fleet. From the ground, we stand. From our ships, we live. By the stars, we hope. And I think that's a really good way to get started here. Keep those in mind as you go through this book. There's going to be, as they travel, a sense of hope towards things, for things to be better. Typically when you see something presented as a far future set science fiction series, it's either a utopia or a dystopia. The world, or more accurately, the universe of the Wayfarers series is just utopia. Like, It's got its problems. It's got its share of conflicts and, things that just don't work, but it's also got plenty of things to recommend it and people who are trying to fix these problems.
I'd say that it thrives in its mundanity.
Yeah, all of these people are everyday folk, and this is true in every book in the Wayfarer series. Thing to understand about the Wayfarer series is you don't have to read these in order. They are all independent of one another, but take place in the same universe.
I'd say, though, there is a thread that connects you back to the beginning. I would recommend reading The Long Way to the Small Angry Planet first. I've only read the first two. I would recommend reading it before reading A Closed and Common Orbit because it does take directly from here and moves on, just not the way that you're expecting.
Yeah, I guess what I would say is if you're looking for a reading order for the Wayfarer series, read Long Way first, and then you can pick and choose whichever ones you want to read after that. They all pick up from the same common thread, but are vastly different in terms of their focus, in terms of their casts, and the stories that they're telling.
But there is a common worldview. There is definitely like that collectivism. There is definitely questioning what makes us people. I don't want to say human because the people who are questioning, who are being questioned by the audience, are not necessarily always human.
Yeah, that's also one of the interesting things I wanted to touch on here. So the overall galactic civilization that all the characters interact with primarily is called the Galactic Commons. And within the Galactic Commons, it's kind of your vaguely United Federation of Planets type thing. But unlike the Federation in Star Trek, it is explicitly non human. Like humans are explicitly unspecial.
Like they're there, but unlike so many stories that take place in sci-fi universes, humans are not the leaders.
Humans aren't the leaders. They don't have a special destiny. There is no human exceptionalism here. Like, it's not that they're unimportant, because in Becky Chambers' worldview, nobody is unimportant, but they don't have any special importance over and beyond any other group. And I think the other thing to remember is that even within humans, there are multiple groups. Like, so you don't have something where, and then you have the representative from Earth.
In fact, the people of Earth, proper Earth, are all pretty much zealots. Not that most of them actually came directly from Earth, since Earth has pretty much destroyed itself. And that's what sends people, humans, out into space.
Yeah, the zealots that you described don't even really live on Earth. They live in satellites around Earth, hoping to make it habitable again. And the other two main groups are people from the Exodus fleet and the Solans, the Solan colonies. So these are, so easiest way to describe them is the Solans are the descendants of capitalists who established colonies in the planets and moons around Earth's solar system.
So Mars is a big one.
Yep, Mars and Titan and Ganymede. We have a character from Enceladus as well.
All moons of Saturn, if I am not
Yes.
wrong. Cool.
And so, yeah, these are the people who left Earth early to build a fortune. And then the Exodus fleet is everybody else who survived. They're the descendants of everybody else who survived, who built great city ships that flew together to try and find a better home after Earth was no longer a place they could live. And they have a radically different worldview from the Solan humans, particularly the Martians.
They're in a different class,
Yeah.
which does get brought up, actually. So, the things to know about the beginning chunk that we read, it's very much about place setting. Our main POV character, there's really, I'd say in this book, it feels like Rosemary is our main POV character, but everyone kind of gets to be POV somewhere.
Rosemary is our first introduction, though.
Yes. And Rosemary is definitely the audience surrogate character. She's a fish out of water. She's brand new to the idea of even being out in space, not just living in a place that isn't Earth, but she's from the Solon colonies. She's from Mars specifically. All we're led to know initially is that she's left her past behind and she's nervous that she's going to be caught. Like, what it made me feel very much like someone who is telling a story about being trans. It felt very much to me like having to put away pre-transition you and go forward as real you. And I thought that that was potentially what was being led up to, is to find out that Rosemary was trans. It's not, but that so strongly paralleled a lot of the experiences and narratives around leaving a past life and moving forward into a found family.
It's also about taking those steps into a wider world. So I think Mars is a good analog for contemporary America, if we're thinking about it, because you have a very stratified class society there. People tend to be fairly individualistic and they focus on their own personal comforts. And you don't have to work too hard to draw the line from point A to point B. They are very concerned about what they consider to be human first.
They're very insular and I think you're right. It feels a lot like American cultural out for myself first. I'm not going to care about the greater good.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, oh, sorry. The greater good.
I'm going to care about me and how others affect me, but I'm not going to care about how I affect others. And yes, you occasionally have a person who has clearly gone to university, school, college, whatever you want to call it, who expands their knowledge academically. That's who Rosemary really is. She's a person who is aware of the failings of individualism, but has not had the opportunity to experience life outside of a very insular bubble.
She knows that she wants to, and she knows that she needs to get out. But that doesn't mean it's not scary. And that doesn't mean that she doesn't have some adjustment to do.
So she's got a background and very high recommendations from her academic professors and life. She's got a lot of book knowledge. She knows how to speak other languages and has been told that she speaks it quite well for a human. But she's not actually spoken with native speakers of the languages. She hasn't put her knowledge to a real test. She hasn't met a lot of people who don't look like her.
The best way to describe her is she's intelligent but inexperienced.
And so she has the internal monologue moments that I think a lot of us have and don't want to admit. And I think that's really good to look at as a mirror. When she first is talking with someone she meets on the ship who is nothing like her, is what species is Syssix?
Andrisk.
I kind of in my head have Lizophos from A Legend of Zelda when I think about the Andrisks, because they are two-legged, stand on two leg, kind of lizard folk-esque, but that's derogatory in the way to describe them. They have a lot of different cultural norms around being close to other people. They have a lot of different cultural norms around things like parenting and family and just day-to-day living than what Rosemary is used to. And she has a thought run through her head unbidden that is essentially, and here's the list of all of the things I know about this species, including they're promiscuous. And then she chides herself for having the thought, because that's not fair, because that's just putting a human expectation on someone who isn't human, or a human social norm on someone who isn't human.
Rosemary is, again, someone who is intelligent and empathetic, but not without her own personal biases. And she's aware of those biases and recognizes that just because she has that thought does not mean she needs to think to say or act on it.
Right. In fact, actually, because she has that thought, she feels like she needs to think and act on being less judgmental, less human centric.
One of the things that Rosemary points out to herself is that the term cold blooded to refer to someone as heartless or cruel is very mammalian centric. And as we get to know this character more, we'll see that she is anything but cruel or heartless.
Her name is Sissix.
And she's wonderful.
In fact, actually, Sissix is one of my favorite, if not my favorite character.
So let's go ahead and move forward here and meet some of the rest of the cast. So, our first characters that we meet on the Wayfarer proper while Rosemary is in transit are Ashby Santoso, who is the captain of the ship. He's an Exodan human, so he's been living on ships his entire life, first on the great big homestead vessels, and then more recently on the Wayfarer, which is I guess the best way to describe it is it's a galactic construction rig almost. His ship bores holes in space to build wormholes that are used to connect all the various civilizations of the galactic commons.
His is a construction vehicle. It's not glamorous, it's dangerous, and it pays well for what he's able to do with it, but not well enough for him to dig himself out of the strata that he's in, like the social rung on the hierarchy. Like he is going to be able to live there decently comfortably, but it doesn't give him a chance to strive for more.
And meanwhile, his actual goal is not so much to make money for himself, but to make money that he can send back to his family in the fleet. He knows that his dad needs surgery and perhaps even a prosthetic eye. He knows that his sister's two kids are growing fast.
Much like it is here, it is expensive to take care of children.
And he wants to take care of his family. And, I think we can all relate to that experience of having family that you feel like you are obligated to. So even if he himself is personally comfortable where he is, he knows that if he made more money, he could do more for them.
And I'd say that there's a parallel in there are a lot of people that come here to the United States from countries where it's economically depressed, where it is a hardship to most people to afford fast food. There are individuals that come to the United States to earn a better living who send most of their money back to their family so that they can have a better than subsistence standard of living.
And what we learn about Ashby in this first little opening vignette is he's generally a pretty chill dude.
He has to be the liaison between all of his crew members, those that like each other and those that do not like each other. And so there's two bits here, right? I'm sure that every teacher has experience with children who like each other, really wanting to sit next to one another in class, spend all their time together, but needs to create a separation so that they will actually pay attention, focus, and learn, and not just so that they will be social. And I know that as a kid, I just wanted to sit next to my best friend. But I also know that if I was looking at it from the outside as an adult, I wouldn't have shut the fork up. I would have distracted everyone. Hell, I did that as a college student in my 30s. So I did get to sit next to my best friends, and I probably annoyed the shit out of my teachers. But then also there's the people that just will not get along.
Yeah, which brings us to Artist Corbin, who is the algaist for the Wayfarer.
So Corbin is I'd say token evil character, but he's not evil. He's just annoying.
He's unpleasant and he's antisocial.
He would much rather be doing his job, which is to keep the fuel tanks at top proficiency.
Just a quick bit of world building here. In this world, interstellar vessels use algae as a fuel source. And so having someone who can cultivate various algal strains is important to making sure that your engines are running smoothly. That's Corbin's job. And he's very good at it. Like, since he's come on board, Ashby's noticed that their fuel economy has improved by 10%.
He has every right to be proud of his work and his work ethic, and that's great. But he's also a demanding little twat. He will not get along with Sissix, which, when you narratively are putting a character against the one that everyone likes, you're making that other character look that much worse. So, like, Corbin's fine. He's fine. He's not an evil character. He's not an awful person. But when he is portrayed as being kind of a pissant to the character that everyone is like, oh, but I wish that I had a friend like you. You know, it just makes Corbin look like a dweeb.
And he is.
He really is.
Corbin is, in many ways, someone who fits that trope of the brilliant Jack
Gash.
who thinks that his brilliance allows him to get away with treating other people like crap. And he's also aware of the limitations of that. He realizes that being valuable is not the same as being irreplaceable. He is a valuable member of the crew, but if he is a bigger pain in the butt to deal with than he provides value with, he can be fired.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, right there, and non binary folk, because what do we call ourselves in this? Whatever. Non binary folk. Anyway, another thing I love about this book, quite honestly, side note, is just how aware Becky Chambers is about treating people with respect, including things like pronouns. But where was I going with this? The thing that I am thinking of right now is, like, I know that people who are looking for jobs get annoyed at the idea of hiring based on fit versus based on skill. You can teach a skill, but you cannot necessarily retrain fit. If you're just gonna be a jerk, no one is going to want to work with you. And in fact, I've had conversations with hiring managers at the places that I've worked at that are like, hey, so this person worked where you went to school. What do you think of them? And I've answered honestly. And they're like, cool, round bin. And I'm like, I didn't mean to not get them a job. They're like, no, but if they can't be good to the people who already work here, we really can't expect a good work environment. And if we can't expect a good work environment, then everyone's going to be miserable and then nothing's going to be created. They'll find somewhere that they fit better. It's just not here.
I've also found that, like, when you're hiring, you're not just thinking about how well you're going to get on with them, but also how well is the rest of your team going to get on with them.
Right.
And that doesn't necessarily mean how easily is everyone going to get on or how frictionless is everyone going to get on, because I've sometimes found that there is productive friction that you can introduce where you hire someone who is different in many ways in terms of their outlook on life, in terms of their cultural background, in terms of their way of thinking, in terms of, just their life experiences, that will push the rest of your group to grow and move beyond their comfort zones. It's not just about finding someone who is always easy to get on with. It's about finding someone who can help make everybody on the team better. And that isn't always the person that is just like them. In fact, it seldom is.
That's quite fair. Again, with filling your classroom full of kids who all like each other, you're not really actually driving the learning forward. You're maybe leading to pleasant experiences, but not fulfilling, like, that ultimate goal.
And it's a delicate thing too, right? Like, you want someone that can introduce maybe a little bit of friction, but not that is just pure unpleasantness.
I'd say challenge beyond friction.
Yeah, like someone who's gonna come in with the right attitude, like they know they're gonna learn stuff and they're also gonna teach stuff.
That's not how I would describe Corbin. He does not have a good attitude. And so Ashby knows just where that line is of how far he can push against Corbin's worst impulses and where it will just infuriate him past being functional. And so Ashby, sets Corbin up to be the tour guide for our new crew member, who, mind you, this current meeting that we are looking in on is actually Corbin coming in and saying, "Are you serious? This person has no experience. This person," like, just rattling off things based on Rosemary's resume instead of based on Rosemary.
Right. Let's remember Corbin hasn't had a single conversation with her. All he's done is looked at the resume.
And he's just throwing a fit. And Ashby's like, "Perfect opportunity for you to get to know her. Please show her around the ship when she gets here." And it flummoxes Corbin enough to just shut him up. And like, fine, he grumbles a bit, but he doesn't push back after that. But I will also say that the second he can get out of it, he does. He's not a good tour guide. And I think that that is unfair to Rosemary because Rosemary does need to have an orientation. And Corbin, just when he is leading her around the ship, is like, there's escape pods, there's all the stuff if things blow up, there's like a whole bunch of procedural things, but not very much in the way of personable things or what is expected on a day-to-day basis.
He gives her the safety briefing.
Yeah.
And that's about the extent of it. Here's where to go in the case of an emergency. Here's what to do if the ship blows up. Here's what to do if you lose oxygen. Here's the first aid kit.
You're peeking.
And Rosemary is a little bit concerned by all of this.
Yeah. I'd say it's very disconcerting to just be told all of the what could go wrong, but she still observes her new home and sees the things that have been created by members of the crew, specifically Kizzy, to make the place feel more like a home and less sterile or hodgepodge. Well, it is still hodgepodge, but it's hodgepodge in the way that is like cottagecore and not hodgepodge in the way that is this steel panel does not match the color of this steel panel.
Yeah, I think cottagecore is actually the right way to describe the aesthetic of the Wayfarer. It's not retro future or some sort of mid-century modern spaceship or anything like that, or even like that weird like Star Trek style 1980s beige.
Attempting to look futuristic, but also like a home, but not succeeding.
Right.
Like there are couches and they all look uncomfortable, or there are beds and they all look uncomfortable, or there are seating, or there are like the lounge, which does not look loungy.
Yeah, the Wayfarer is, I think the best way to describe it is lived in.
So I love, and this is get us into talking about Kizzy. Kizzy well, first off, she's the engineer keeping one of the pair of techies that is keeping the Wayfarer afloat, so to speak. Like she and Jinx are the people who are keeping the guts together and optimized. And Kizzy is also the one who recognizes the need for comforts. And so she even goes so far as to provide softness for Rosemary's new room. Like she has made curtains and provided pillows and like bedspreads. And I think Rosemary, even once she gets to see her room, refers to her little bed that's tucked in a corner as a little nest. And I gotta say, that's like the most neurodivergent friendly description of kind of the bunk situation, right? Like, let's fill this thing that could just be austere and functional with comforts and colors and just stimuli that isn't overwhelming but is welcomed.
It's also telling that Kizzy, when she first meets Rosemary, gives her a great big hug and says, "Welcome home." And then also leaves a welcome note that says, again, "Welcome home," in Rosemary's quarters, really reinforcing that this ship is not just a vehicle, it is where these people live full time. This is their safe place.
And like it's inspiring me to want to kind of turn my little nap cloud into even more of a nest idea than it already is. We've previously, when we've had kind of wow is the best way that I can describe it, like a little bit of harder times in our relationship, harder things that have kind of rocked us. We've come back together and said, do you want to turn our room into a blanket fort? Do you want to turn our space into something that is cozy and comforting and close without being claustrophobic, but something that is colorful and soft?
Kizzy is also like, if you've ever been diagnosed with ADHD or you lived with someone who is as well, you will recognize Kizzy. She's got constant reminders scrawled everywhere, one of which is remember to eat.
Yes. I'm going to say this as a person who is not diagnosed with ADHD, but has a lot of tendencies that mirror different parts of neurodivergent things. I don't have any formal diagnoses of anything, but there's probably something. Eating gets shunted when you are otherwise hyper focused so often. Taking care of things like bathroom breaks or anything. Like, I think we recently, I think in the last episode, just said how you can convince yourself to just keep going a little bit. Just, okay, I'm going to go to the next row of this crochet, or I'm going to go to the end of this bag of Lego, or I'm going to paint until this particular point and then I'm going to be done, or I'm going to draw till this particular point, or I'm going to read one more article, or I'm going to read 30 more pages and then I'm done, or whatever, next chapter, and then I'll fall asleep. All of these things where you look up and it's 4 hours later and you're like, oh, I have a headache.
Yeah, this happens to me a lot when I start playing video games. Like when I get really sucked into a game, then I realize, oh, I really need to eat something, or oh, I have things that I have to do.
Right. So sometimes, like, things that have a natural break are great. Like, we are still playing a lot of Hades. Super excited for Hades too. Anyway, but there's a natural spot where we can quit, and it's a good thing.
Yes. The other engineer is Jenks. Basically, the way to think of them is Kizzy is the mech tech. She is the one who handles the physical infrastructure of the ship, all of the mechanics, basically. And Jenks is the comp tech. He is the one who's responsible for handling the software side of things, particularly the ship's AI, Lovey, aka Lovelace.
Who is just as much a part of the crew, just as much a person as any other member of the crew.
Yeah, Jenks is responsible for making sure that Lovey is taken care of. He's basically her caretaker.
But also, as Lovey has learned and grown throughout her time being the AI for this ship, because she's an aftermarket addition to the ship, much like everyone else, she's learned and grown from her interactions with the people on this ship. And Jinx has fallen in love with her.
And she's also in love with him. They have an interesting love story. They both care deeply for each other. And like Lovey knows that Jenks would at some point probably enjoy being able to have a physical relationship with her. And Jenks knows he would never want to ask that of Lovey if that's not what she actually wants.
It would require illegal tech to put her into a body that is designed to house an AI. And she seems like she wants that, and she's doing her best to try to convince Jinx that she wants it for herself. I think we, as a removed from this situation viewer, can see clearly that that's not true.
Well, and the other thing that's kind of interesting is Jenks admits to himself that yes, it would be pretty cool if they were able to physically be together. At the same time, he is not so biologically chauvinist, for lack of a better word, as to assume that her having a physical body, is the end goal or should be her end goal. For her, the ship is her body. Its sensors are her eyes and ears. The speakers placed throughout the ship are her voice. She has a completely different paradigm of being that is not the same as having a single body like you or I would have.
She has a direct link to what is essentially the internet. She can find out information in split seconds anytime she wants.
And she has perfect recall, perfect memory. And he makes sure that her subroutines are working the way they should. He's making sure that her hardware gets upgraded as needed or repaired as needed or replaced. But she ultimately has agency, and he makes a point of respecting her agency.
I think that's one of the themes I love about this. There is a focus on certain things that I find very important: autonomy, personal autonomy, collectivism, doing what's best for everyone and not just for oneself, empathy, the idea of consent.
Yeah, and it's also talking a bit about what it's like to live with disability. So Jenks lives with dwarfism. So he's familiar with what it's like to have everyone ask him if he wants to get a procedure done to fix it.
Or to fix him.
Right. And he is very explicit in saying, I don't need to be modified in that way. Like, and it's not that he doesn't have body modifications. Like, he's got tattoos and things like that. And he says, those are all things that I chose to have because they remind me of experiences that I've had and things that I've loved. And, yeah, I've got an oral implant as well because that helps me to hear and it helps me to interact with the people I love. But I don't need someone to make me taller or anything like that. I don't need someone to fix me. I'm happy being me. And, I think that parallels how, a lot of people dealing with any kind of disability, whether that's one of the visible ones or the invisible ones, oftentimes ends up feeling.
So, at a lesser point to this, I've had crooked teeth since I was 8, and my adult teeth started growing in where I have a crossbite. And I used to have a much more pronounced crossbite because I, in my 20s, had Invisalign braces. In my teens, I wanted braces. I wanted to have a more socially acceptable, perfect, whatever smile. In my 20s, I started actually really thinking it was kind of cute. And while it's kind of a pain in the butt to keep clean, and, I have overlap and crowding and whatever, it doesn't hurt. And it was not a problem. The person I was with made fun of my crooked smile enough that I got the braces. And now I have a harder time chewing through certain things. I stopped wearing my retainer because it hurt, and it hurt in a way that was so much more unpleasant than just having my teeth not be perfectly straight. I did it because he said to do it, not because I wanted it. It wasn't for me. It was for someone else. And that is never going to be a thing with lasting positive change.
Yeah, like I think when Becky Chambers talks about this stuff, she's not saying that anyone who gets a procedure like that or does something to address a condition that they live with, they're not wrong for wanting to do that, but they're the ones who get to choose if that procedure is right for them. If Jenks wanted to do something different with the dwarfism, that would be his prerogative, and it's 100% okay that he does not want to.
And so I have been rattling something around in my head during this conversation. With our current political stuff, there's a lot of people that are railing against the idea of caring about consent, caring about other people collectively, because they see it as a zero sum game or pie, as in, if I give you something, I don't have it any longer. And so I am taking away from my own self. And so I'm not going to do that. But the thing is that people who deride consent for others experience their life with their own autonomy and their own consent and their own everything pretty much intact because of privilege. Like they're not being threatened. Their happiness, well being, and consent and choice isn't being threatened. So they aren't living the thing that they're trying to impose on others. They're saying, who cares about all this stuff? But if you threatened theirs, they would.
Violently, oftentimes.
Right.
Yeah. And it's pretty clear that Becky Chambers does not share that worldview, and neither do the characters in this book. The other major character that we meet in this little chapter here is Sissix, who takes over the tour guide duties almost immediately.
As soon as she realizes that Corbin has been assigned to be the one to show Rosemary around, she's just like, oh, I'm sure that he did a great job on the safety briefing. Anyway, you're mine now. And then shows her the more creature comforts areas, shows her to her room, shows her to the hydroponics bay, essentially, which is, the kitchen, shows her to the rec room. This is where you go to kind of wind down. This is where you go to relax. This is where you go when your job's done for the day and you need to decompress. And also introduces her to another one of my favorites.
Dr. Chef.
Yes, Dr. Chef.
Dr. Chef is the doctor/chef of the ship, like his name suggests.
Absolutely holistic from nutrition through triage.
Dr. Chef is just a delight. It's not actually his name. Let's be clear.
His name is unpronounceable to anyone that doesn't have his physiology.
Yeah, and also his patience, because apparently it contains multitudes and it's in multiple layers. Like, so he has different vocal cords that each convey different threads of meaning within it. So even though it's something that is relatively short, each one of those chords is saying just one small part of the meaning of it. So just doing a rough translation is still something that would probably take paragraphs. So he goes, Dr. Chef's fine.
And Rosemary, bless her heart, is like, can I try? Sure, here's what it sounds like. And she's like, oh. But I think he's a very lovely character because he does care about the people, their well-being, their nutrition, their health as a whole, their mental health.
Yeah, he is nurturing in every sense of that. Like, he is making sure that not only is the food nutritious and has all of the things that their diverse physiologies will need, he also, though, wants it to be something that is tasty and delicious to their unique physiologies as well. Because he knows that he has an array of people living on this ship who all have, like, their taste buds don't work the same. They don't eat the same sorts of things. They don't have the same nutritional requirements.
They don't have the same eating schedule.
Right. So he works to make sure that they have something that they can all enjoy. This is also where we get our little talk about how the diets work in space. So this is another one of those Exodus Solon splits.
And I would also say this is a class split.
Yeah.
The Solons took cows with them.
Right, because they wanted to make sure that they could have steak and hamburgers while they were on Mars. Meanwhile, they left a whole bunch of humans behind. Never mind the fact that they had to do a lot of extra work to make space on Mars for their cows.
And this is also a really great opportunity to flip the script on, wait, you eat mammals? Ew.
Right.
Instead of, oh my God, you guys all eat bugs? Ew.
Right. The Exodans grew up relying on insects for protein.
Extraterrestrial insects also.
Turns out, though, Dr. Chef knows how to prepare them just right.
Almost like lobsters, actually. Like, that's what the what are they? The
Let's find out.
red something bugs.
Yeah,
It's closer to the end of the.
yeah. Red coast bugs.
Thank you. So the red coast bugs, which make up the bulk of the meal, plus like salads and other rolls and things to welcome Rosemary, are kind of like lobsters. They're kind of like crayfish. And Rosemary's never had one, but they are a staple food for most spacers. So she's stuck here looking embarrassed and going, I don't know. I want to enjoy this with everybody. And quietly and without drawing attention to it, Sissix shows her how to disenshell the bugs and reach the meat. And I think that that was done gracefully. And it was nice and left Rosemary, who comes from what is like higher class background, a way to experience things that are normal to everyone here without calling it out or embarrassing her.
Yeah, what we see is an example of having a welcoming committee rather than a gatekeeping committee.
I've also been, as an adult, like I don't have any experience really with getting crab meat out of shells. And I have been infantilized by an older family member trying to show me how to get into the meat of a crab very loudly and making it so that obviously everyone knew that I didn't know how to do that. Safe-ish place, not really like that big of a deal, but at the same time, kind of annoying. But I think it matters. When you're new to something, when you haven't had experience with something, you're more likely to get agitated quickly. And I think Sissix did a really good job of de-escalating what could have been really stressful for Rosemary.
And there's a big difference between looking down on someone for not having had an experience versus welcoming them and encouraging them to experience it. Like, the crew don't mock her for never having had it. Their reaction is, oh, this is actually really good. I think you're going to like it. Here's the history of how this dish came to be. This is now something that is a staple for this particular group. And it's one of our favorite things to have around here.
Dinner time is also a chance for the last crew member really to be mentioned.
That's Ohan.
And they are a cyanate pair, which is yet another species that is an unfamiliar archetype to most of the sci-fi I've been introduced to.
So cyanide pairs are best described as composite beings. So you have the base cyanide body that has then been infected with a hyper intelligent virus that physiologically alters it and is sort of a separate consciousness. And it enables a cyanide pair to do complex hyperspace computations in their heads without having to need a computer or anything like that.
And faster.
Much faster. And this is really important because the job of the wayfarer is to basically plot a course from point A to point B to build a hyperspace wormhole so that other ships can just travel through it like it's a train track or something like that.
It takes complex math.
And because of the unique gifts of this hyper intelligent virus, right now, pretty much only a cyanide pair can do that unaided.
And we have an interesting conversation that happens. Ohan is mentioned by Sissix, I think, and referred to as they. And then a little bit later, Ohan is mentioned as everyone kind of sits down and figures out their seating arrangement and everything. There's one empty chair, and Rosemary comments on this and is told, we know that Ohan cannot partake, but we're welcoming and want to give them a space anyway, because they are very much an introvert. They are very much likely to get sick from anything that is passed on from outside of the ship. Every one of the people in the ship has immubots.
They're little nanotech immune system enhancers that take care of a body's internal health.
And so our crew isn't going to pass anything on, although they do need a firmware update for Rosemary to make sure that it's perfectly safe. But Ohan keeps to themselves. They don't eat like everybody else eats. They have nutritional paste that sounds unpleasant to everybody but Ohan.
And I believe they also have some food allergies that make it dangerous for them to be in the presence of other people's food.
So there's this whole host of things that prevent them from being present with the rest of the crew, but they want to make a welcoming space just in case.
We've all had that friend or been that friend who maybe doesn't always like to spend a lot of time with other people, is happier by themselves, but at the same time would like to be asked when there are group activities, even if the answer is always going to be no, has historically always been no. It still means a lot to know that they have an invitation.
But back to the conversation, because Rosemary is unfamiliar with they them pronouns being used, not that there are no gender neutral pronouns, because Zazier, Rosemary tries using Zazier pronouns and is quickly told no, Ohan uses they them. That is the correct way to refer to them, even though Ohan is male, because they are two entities that inhabit the same body. They are they. And I think that does a gentle kind of telegraph to the audience that you respect someone's pronouns as they wish to be called. Although I really do wish that there were instances of that happening that weren't for multiple personalities in the same body kind of deal. Because one of the biggest frustrating, insincere arguments about refusing to use they them is that, oh, but I don't want to use they them if it's not for plural, multiple people. And I'm like, see that wallet on the ground? There's nothing in it that has any ID marks. What are we going to do with it? We're going to try to find a way to get it back to them. Like, we naturally use they, them for people we do not know the gender of.
And I think one of the things that you'll see in this book is that gender as a construction is incredibly diverse across the galaxy. And so using neopronouns like Zazier is much more
Prevalent.
It's much more prevalent, and not just prevalent, it's a norm.
Accepted and expected.
Yeah. Like the characters don't assume that the gender identities are strict binaries.
They don't even assume that they match the presentation.
Right.
Because there are some species that you cannot tell based on presentation, based on secondary sex characteristics, any of that. And in fact, there are some species that definitely have some members who are gender fluid. And again, you can't tell, you have to be told.
And those species that have a lot of gender fluid people in their makeup, they have an expected role within society as well. They are not treated as outliers. We'll talk about that when we get to the Eluans.
I don't know how much of that is touched on in this book, so much as some of that is really touched on in A Closed and Common Orbit. Again, highly recommend that book. So if anyone wants that one to be one of our books that we look at, also a thing that we're open to. You just got to let us know. I think ending with that and not really necessarily going into plot so much more is probably good. We've been talking for a while, and I think we can get to our Phronimos.
Yeah, it's your turn to pick this week. I think you got some good choices. Who'd you pick?
I was very tempted to choose Rosemary because she approaches a new situation with curiosity and empathy, and I think that that's important. But I think I'm going to choose Sissix because she anticipates the needs that Rosemary might have and is welcoming without being, as you said, a gatekeeper. I really like that she's unabashedly still herself, even though she is living in a situation where her social norms are not most of the rest of the crew's social norms and might be perceived as too forward, but she's also not holding back so much of her personality that she can't express herself.
I think what interests me about Sissix and this book in general is it really explores that line between cultural assimilation and
Integration?
and yeah, and cultural integration and syncretism.
I think everyone needs to be able to still remain true to themselves and their own way of being in a way that fits and complements those that they are around and care for.
Yeah, Sissix is never asked to be not Andrisk, or asked to be human or Grum or Cyanat. She's just asked to be Sissix, and that means that she is Andrisk. At the same time, she also knows that some of her cultural norms are not theirs, and so they may not be ready to deal with all of that. So, like, the Andrisk are very physically affectionate. They like to have physical touch and contact with other people, and it's very normal for that.
And it's not always or necessarily a sexual thing.
Right. However, when Sissix meets Rosemary, she knows, hey, this is a new person. I don't need to come up and give them a great big
Cuddle?
cuddle. Yeah. And there's a physiological reason why Andrisk are like that. I mean, they are reptilian, so that means that, you know, they don't generate heat within their own bodies. So they're always trying to keep warm. And Sissix prefers to have the heat up generally in the cockpit because it's more comfortable for her. She is looking for bodily warmth.
Also, comfort.
Hmm.
And I love that she has the ability to have that with Ashby, our captain. Even though, at this point in the story, she's definitely not getting enough physical affection. But she's also not like trying to force her will on others without their consent. And I think the way that she's portrayed also, spoilers a little bit, is that she's a little bit self-sacrificing in this. She's willing to care about other people's comforts above her own, and I think that that is something that I see mirrored in myself.
Well, and when you look at the little bits of personal comfort that she asks for, she wants it warmer in the cockpit where she spends most of her time, doing her job. She wants just, maybe the food that she likes every now and then, just little small things.
Reminders of home and comfortable things for her specifically.
Hmm.
So she does take up space, but maybe not as much as she actually could. And I think that that is something that we see a lot in the people who like to take care of others.
I think it's also interesting seeing her go on a journey to learn to accept other people taking care of her.
As we go on in the story.
I think you picked a good one.
Thank you very much.
That's a good one.
I was wondering if you were going to do that. That's been a little running joke when we've been playing Hades. Anyway, it's your turn to recommend something, and I'm just curious what you've recommended this week. You forgot.
No, I just haven't been able to think of something.
Oh no. The look on your face, though, it went from being really content and happy and cozy to being like deer in the headlights, and it was adorable. Do you have a book recommendation that you'd give? Do you have a show recommendation? I mean, I'd recommend White Lotus to people, but like it's very niche and very screwed up. We've already, I
Uh,
think, probably recommended Severance by default.
we have,
Nerd Forge is another one.
I'm thinking
I'm just keep giving you all of these things, and maybe I should just shut up and let you think.
let me think here a little bit. Thank you. All right, I got it. So, my recommendation is sort of a riff on the late night talk show, Everybody's Live with John Mulaney. It is a streaming talk show on Netflix that airs at 7 p.m. on Wednesdays, and then you can just stream it whenever afterwards. Where it's, instead of talking about current events, it is deliberately mundane. Like, he'll bring on a panel of celebrity guests and then asks them random questions about, how do you feel about owing people money or lending people money? And then he'll take callers, and then generally, if he finds them boring, cut them off. And at one point, he gets scammed by someone claiming to be the manager for Bone Thugs and Harmony.
All right.
It's weird. It is about what you've come to expect.
Is it kind of anti-comedy?
Every now and then a bit, yeah.
All right.
Um,
I'm not sure I'm going to take that recommendation. It's something that you've apparently found on your own.
yep, it is. It's usually something that makes me chuckle pretty well. So
All right.
you'll get a sensible chuckle out of it, I think. Well, with that, it's time to pick our 7 words.
You have words from life, I have words from the book, and my notes are not in this room.
And I haven't picked my words from life.
Oh no, let's record that later.
Yeah, we can do that later.
Okay. Alrighty, and now it's time for our 7 words. You have 7 words from life, and I have 7 words from the book. One quick note to everybody, if you hear music in this episode or the episode that drops in 2 weeks, we have neighbors out in our park trying to have a nice afternoon while it's sunny and pretty and lovely, and they are blasting some music. So if YouTube takes this down for a copyright strike, it wasn't my fault because I didn't play the music for you.
That's fair.
Hopefully they don't, and hopefully it's not distracting. But we kind of don't have a choice. And, a little bit of behind the scenes, sometimes we record different bits on different days. So,
It happens.
yep. Alrighty. And so my 7 words from the book, I actually have 4 different choices that I was thinking about. First one was, she wasn't supposed to be awake yet. That was about Rosemary on her way. It's a good little bit of world building to have tech that's supposed to work in a certain way that just doesn't. It makes it feel real and lived in. The next one I have is, I'd find you pretty in any package, which is, I think, a lovely sentiment. And in this case, it's pretty literal because this is about Lovey, and this is something that Jinx said to her. Have you even seen your room yet? I think that that's a really good reminder that some of the characters are much more human, or I'm going to rewind that, are much more people-centered, and some of the characters are much more process-centered. I think we can tell who's who. And then the phrase that I actually did choose is, living in space was anything but quiet. And the reason that I chose that, I think everyone here has probably seen what space battles on TV would be like without a soundtrack, without the pew pew, and without the music and such, right? Like out in space, no one can hear you scream type thing, or that like sound waves don't travel, or that things don't have that same chaotic soundscape. But in this story, that's not the case, right? Like this is not a quiet, calm, relaxing place to live. The spaceship that they are on is constantly rattling or moving or vibrating. There isn't silence here.
I mean, they're also living with Kizzy, so of course there's no silence there.
Yes. However, true silence would be very worrying.
Yeah. While if you were to look at the ship from the outside, yes, you could not hear anything. Within the ship itself is a whole different story, though. And I think one of the things that this kind of captures is, like you were saying, that lived in feel. Like this is a lived in future where most things aren't shiny and brand new and homogenous. The ship itself is, a collection of customizations and kind of a hodgepodge in places.
I'd say that that is mirrored in the crew as well.
Yeah, the crew is a hodgepodge in the best kind of way. Like they're all a little different. They've all got their own foibles. They've all got their own things that they like, things that they dislike. And so each part of the ship reflects part of the crew. It gives it that sort of cottagecore look almost, like it's a cottagecore spacecraft. It's not sleek and modern. It's not perfectly clean in all places, but what it is warm and inviting and cozy in its own weird way.
All points that I think we actually made when we recorded the first bit of this, but that was like 3 weeks ago.
Who can remember such things?
Not us.
Nope. I think that's a good pick. So for mine, this is words from my guitar teacher.
Our guitar teacher.
Shut up and take the compliment, damn it.
Did he say that to you too?
Yes. I know he's had to say that to you multiple times. In this case, it was after I had gone to sort of an informal guitar club meeting at work, and I actually showed off my playing to people who actually knew something about the instrument. And they're like, "Oh man, you're playing pretty good. Nice job." Like, "Oh, I'm not that great." And so I mentioned it to my teacher, and he goes, "No, see, that's actually something that's really good. You need to just shut up and take the compliment, damn it." And yeah, I think sometimes it's a good thing to do. It's one thing to be humble, like you're saying, "Ah, thanks." But you can also thank someone for a compliment. It's not arrogant to say, "Thank you, I appreciated that." That's being kind.
Now, a little bit of I really, really like our guitar teacher. And even before he was my guitar teacher, like he knew that he could flip crap at me. At our not this most recent, but the one before student concert for our lessons was the one that I played Nothing Else Matters. We actually played together. And at the end of the thing, he's like, "That was a good job." And I'm like, "Yeah, I know everywhere that I messed up." And he's like, "Fork you."
Yeah. He does not like it when people talk negatively about themselves, and
No.
it's something that I try and keep in mind. I think it actually comes down to something that I remember from when I was taking creative writing in, like, high school, middle school, and one thing our teacher talked to us about was how, like, in every creative person's life, there's the inner critic that is constantly telling you how you screwed up, how what you're doing isn't good, how what you're doing does not measure up, how it's, yeah, generally not worth the time and effort. It can be meaner than the meanest online critic out there. In many cases, it'll have that same voice. And if you listen to that inner critic, nothing will get made. You'll never try anything. And yeah, you might not make a terrible thing, but you'll also never make a good thing. Part of the creative process is just being able to shut up that inner critic, take the compliment, and keep going. Learn from it, but don't live with it.
I do enjoy that advice. I wish I could take it better. I wish I could apply it better, but I do have a very strong self-deprecating streak.
I've noticed. Well, with that, I'd like to thank you for potting with me.
Thank you for potting with me.
And thanks for listening to Tales from the Waystone. Join us next time as we continue our summer reading program with pages 68 through 125 of The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet.
We would like to thank our friend Shawnee Jang for our theme music.
And many thanks to Becky Chambers for creating an engaging universe to explore.
Audio production, editing, and sometimes I chat on Discord, courtesy of me, Phoenix and Cullah.
And writing and project management, courtesy of me, Will McCullough.
If you would like to help support us and have the means to do so, please consider becoming a patron on our Patreon page. Otherwise, please just join our Discord. We really, really like talking with people. And with that, here's one more day above the roses.
To one more day above the roses.
Ding! Not in the face, not in the face.
Oh no, oh no, oh no.